Hello, my nerdy friends. It's good to see you all again. Um, so it's been a minute, but we have so much good stuff coming. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about that, but mostly, it's great to be back. I don't know about y'all, but the world's been a little on fire, huh? Um, it's been a little tricky to create content. To be totally honest, it's made it hard to concentrate on that. And then also, life's just been very full and busy. But behind the scenes, we're doing a lot of planning. I think we're going to be launching a Discord server soon. So if you just want to get in there and talk comics and other good, fun, nerdy things with the community, there's going to be a place for you to get in there and chat. We have some content creator collaborations coming up that I'm really excited about. We're going to be broadening the content across the board too, with some of the guests you've seen already on some previous shows that I'm going to be bringing on and giving more room to talk about topics that they're super into. You'll definitely still get plenty of my opinions and thoughts. Don't worry. I know you were desperate for that. And just in general, be able to deliver a little bit more content to you more regularly as we bring in more voices. But also, I since we launched have been in a sort of constant state of testing some things out, making some adjustments, testing some things out, making some adjustments, both so that I have the best experience possible, because I want to enjoy doing this, um, and so that I can give you guys the best content that I can put forth. So I just think we are getting closer and closer and closer to that ideal, but it takes some downtime. But this is a solo show, just me, and it's a storytime show. I want to tell you a little bit about some comics I picked up from New Comic Book Day, and kind of just some the bigger titles you'll probably know, and kind of the state of things, some thoughts I have on it. Talk a little bit about a giveaway, and then story time. I'm going to tell you a story that I think you're going to enjoy, about how I got the signatures of Stan Lee and John Romita, the senior, um, on this ASM 91, many, many years ago. I didn't purchase it that way. So I'll also tell you the process for sending in a signed book to get graded, in that story. But the best part of the story, frankly, is that if you know Larry Hama, most known for his work on the G.I. Joe comic book, but has written a ton of books. I think he's got a Marvel title right now, if I'm not mistaken. And cover artist on a number of things. He played an instrumental role in me getting that book sent. So I'm going to tell you that story in just a moment. But let's start, little housekeeping. So we are somewhere around 150 followers. When we get to 200, we've been talking about a giveaway. And I've been working on putting some things together. And here's what we're going to do. When we get to 200 subscribers, I'll randomize it. I will videotape me randomizing it so you see it. And to keep kind of current with series that are coming down the pipe here, we're going to give away a Miss Marvel #1, the action figure variant. And America Chavez, the Volume 2, #3, which is the first appearance of her sister, which is an interesting character. We'll get to at some point, but I think, as of right now, it's a minor key, but could have some long-term dividends. And then this Volume 2, #1 of She-Hulk. So we've got two Disney Plus series leads coming down the pipe, and one we just got introduced in Multiverse of Madness. So I'm going to be giving those books away, and probably some other goodies as well. So subscribe if you're watching this and you haven't. Hit that like and the notification bell and all that stuff. Tell your friends. We get to 200, we can randomize that. Okay. Quickly, some quick comics, so pickups. So let's start with indies real quick. So two real kind of landmark indie series in recent times, in very recent times, is Something's Killing the Children. You all know it probably. Really like a phenom. It's hard to think of a precedent. it took a long hiatus. It came back, and it's been good. Um, but I actually think like it's the hype has died a little bit, and it's actually delivering higher than I think it was when it generated the hype. So if you took a break or you haven't been reading it for a little bit, it's still bringing heat. New characters, they're expanding the lore. Our protagonist, Erica Slutter, is still right in the center, and her story and background keeps evolving, growing. Great, anyway, great new characters, great read. I just think it's getting better and better and better. In contrast, so I love Saga. I think Saga is probably, if I had to, it's hard to do this, but like in the last decade plus, it's probably the best new series that launched. And talk about hiatus, I think it was off for about 3 years and came back. And it's a little hard to talk about Saga in its current state without spoilers for somebody who hasn't read it, because first of all, Saga is like Games of Thronesy in the amount of characters it loses along the way and the amount of plot twists. And before their 3 year hiatus, took had its biggest plot twist of all, and there's a character missing from the mix. So since it's come back, it's still Saga, right? Uh, you know, Fiona Staples' art is as beautiful as ever. Brian K. Vaughan's writing is as great as ever. The character is inventive. The story continues to be both tiny and epic simultaneously. But we're missing a character that we had for the overwhelming first half. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're a fan of the series, if you haven't, you'll be there eventually. But there's like it's weird to say this about a comic book, but I think there's a chemistry problem. We removed somebody off the board who I think really um, added so much as far as blending everyone else together, bringing a perspective that was really important, that I'm finding since its relaunch a little bit of a harsh read. And Saga's a harsh book, but it's a harsh book with heart, and I'm struggling with it a little bit. So if you're reading Saga, I would love to know. Please reach out. Tell me what you think since its relaunch, because it's still like from a execution of skill as high as it gets. Now to Marvel and a couple Spidey books. So Miles Morales, who I adore, absolutely adore, and I've generally really enjoyed this current volume of Miles. But I don't know, it's starting to fall off for me, and is starting to dip into repeat territory with some Peter Parker storylines, which I think is really risky because there's so many people already ready to jump at the Miles, which I think is such a well-developed, distinct character and distinct voice, and distinct style from Peters, but just say it's just a knockoff. And I shouldn't say it's retreading just Spidey stories, though there's some of that, but just retreading kind of like some Marvel tropes, and it's just landing a little flat. I don't find it as crisp, as fun. I mean, Miles has always been a really fun character. We're time hopping, we're dealing with clones, we're doing a lot of kind of you know, heavily treaded paths without anything really new to say. So are some new appearances in the newest arc. And I'm not saying don't read it. I just it's not carrying the spark for me. In contrast, in a complete swing of change of fortune, Amazing Spider-Man, which I know, that a lot of, and I'm one of them, long term. I mean, Spidey's my guy since the very beginning, since I was, since I could read. Um, I know that a lot of people have really stopped reading Amazing Spider-Man in recent years, and I don't blame you. I just think it's been uninspired and flat. I actually did enjoy the most recent creative team, but since it relaunched, we're just on issue 2 now. This Zeb Wells run and John Romita Jr. I think it's fantastic. Like it feels so wonderfully old school Spidey to me. It's got a lot of well-known beats, but giving it to it a little different. The dialogue's tight, the action's tight. Tombstone has been kind of the center point as a villain. He's such an underrated villain, great Spidey villains. And I know a lot of people John Romita Jr. is a little bit of a love-hate artist, and frankly, I'm not a huge fan of some of his work. I found the lines very heavy and you know, I don't know, lacking a certain like flexibility and vibrancy. Um, but the inking and coloring and the way it's being handled, I actually think makes his style feel the creative teams really bring out the best in his work. It makes it feel fresh in a way that it hasn't in many years. It's cleaner, so it reads well. It looks beautiful. It's paced really, really well. You know, frankly, when Pete Parker's struggling, Spider-Man is at its best. He's definitely struggling right now. Um, and yeah, it's off to a gangbuster start. So if you fell off ASM, if you fell off Amazing Spider-Man, highly recommend jumping back in. It's at a great place right now. So those are just some pickups. Certainly picked up more. That was a relatively light week. But that's all that preamble. So let me get into this story. So story time. All right. This story is mostly an upbeat, fun story. There's a sad part to the story, and I will either save it for the end so folks can bow out, or maybe I'll tell it on another episode, and focus in a little more on it. But most of the story is really fun, and happy. So I hope you enjoy it. So the year is 1993. How do I know it's 1993? Because I had a driver's license. So I had to be at least 17. I was still living in New Jersey. And Ren and Stimpy are involved. Many of you may not know what Ren and Stimpy are or who they are, but for a brief period of time, they were a pop culture phenomenon. So it's the summer of 93. I am a camp counselor. I'm working in a summer camp. And a buddy of mine, Eric, who is equally into geeky things as I am, mentions that he saw that there was going to be a local comic convention in a town over from where we live. And this is going to sound hard to conceptualize for younger folks, or folks who have only kind of gotten into comics in this sort of post superhero movie era. But like, comic conventions were like a tiny thing. They were a fringe thing, that just like, dorks like myself went to. And this one was being held in a gymnasium in Bergenfield, New Jersey. So we decided we're going to go to this comic convention. And something you need to know about the 90s comic scene. It is hard, if you were not actively engaged at the time, it is hard to explain how popular the X-Men and Spider-Man were in the late 80s into early, mid, even late 90s. They were everything. Like everything. Like Marvel had so many different X book titles, kind of like now, but printing at 10 times the runs. So many Spidey books. And they basically dominated the sales charts, every month. I think Batman was the only book even in the mix with them. And you had the Batman 89, the Keaton film. And so, there's some popularity there, but X-Men and Spider-Man carried Marvel. If you pulled those books out, Marvel was done, no doubt. I mean, Avengers was nothing then. Iron Man was nothing then. It just wasn't. So, and then within the X-Men, Wolverine was by far the most popular X-Men. So pretty much Wolverine and Spider-Man carried Marvel and were the dominant characters of the time. And this, I think, is the part that's the farthest to realize if you only know comics now. Sabretooth, the X-Men villain, was a massive deal as well. He's probably the biggest villain going at the time, primarily because he was Wolverine's antagonist. So Wolverine versus Sabretooth were the epic battles of the time. So he became super powerful villain, super popular, villain. sometimes anti-hero, etc. And I mean, like, when I say he was I mean, at the time, he was certainly more popular than Thanos. He was certainly more popular than Doctor Doom, I think, even at the time. He was certainly more popular than um, Lex Luthor. He was, I mean, whatever your big villains, maybe the Joker, but I'm not even sure that's true at the time. Um, so much so that they did a Sabretooth miniseries, a 4-issue miniseries. And they did that Sabretooth miniseries right here. Oh, God, lots of glare. Mark Teixeira, I think that's how you say his name, did the art. Larry Hama, you can see his signature right there. Larry Hama wrote the books. Okay. And if you know anything about Marvel, you know they are, to be honest, notoriously cheap with the quality of their paper. They don't do a lot of premium stock stuff. These were done in premium paper, premium covers, gorgeous books. And so I was obsessed with that series. And at this comic convention, Larry Hama was going to be there, who wrote the series. So my main thing was I was going to go get my Sabretooth series books signed by Larry Hama. And I was stoked. Again, I'm 17. So like all that like 17-year-old like, X-Men were the biggest thing. Wolverine was the biggest X-Men. Sabretooth was the villain. And the writer was going to be there and the miniseries would come out. Okay. So we get there and we go to the gym and we pay, I don't know, maybe it was $7 to get in or something like that. Maybe 11. Cannot be more than that. Which seems ridiculous, right? If you've ever bought convention tickets recently, you understand. And it's all in one room. And, you know, there's some sellers with some tables, pop-up full tables, a couple people signing. Cosplay wasn't a thing then. There was no like MC. There were no shows. There were no, just, you know, comics being sold, some people signing stuff. So first of all, we get there and we get literally greeted by Ren and Stimpy, by these two people dressed up in, you know, the full Ren and Stimpy costume, and they're at the entrance. And Eric, my buddy Eric, and I take a Polaroid with Ren and Stimpy, and I have that Polaroid somewhere, but I couldn't find it. I was trying to find it for the story. So I get online to get Larry Hama's signature, and his line's pretty long. It's really popular, and he looks back at the line, and he looks at me, and I don't know why he's singling me out, but he looks at me and he goes, "Why are you waiting online to get my signature? Stanley is right over there. Go get his autograph." And again, this is going to be hard to fathom if you weren't in it then. There were no comic book celebrities then, right? Stanley actually had been more famous earlier in sort of pop culture, but at that time was not a big name. And I was 17. It's not like I was steeped in comic history. But at least I did have the presence of mind to be like, Spider-Man's my favorite character. Stanley's the creator of Spider-Man. That's a good point. He's over there. And his line was not long. Like, not even like a little. Like, there were a couple people there. But I brought my Wolverine books to get signed, my Sabretooth books to get signed. I had not brought Spider-Man book to get signed. So I went to one of the dealer's tables and I tried to find the nicest and oldest ASM I could find that I could afford. And I got ASM 91, this issue. Okay. From 1970. And maybe I paid $10. Maybe. It just completely different market then. But still $10 for a back issue was a big deal back then. So I took the book and I got online to Stanley, and I got up to Stanley and he looks at the book, and I think everyone had been bringing him like real modern books. So it was one of those, and which he wasn't writing at that point, right? Like they weren't actually his books. So this is when he actually wrote, and he looks at it, he goes, "Oh, this was a good one." You almost hear him doing his Excelsior, right? And he signs it, and he taps the guy next to him, and he goes, Johnny, look what book it is. And there's John Romita, father of John Romita Jr., who I was talking about earlier. There's John Romita, iconic Spider-Man artist. And he goes, oh, yeah. And he signs it too. And if Larry Hama hadn't had the presence of mind in that moment to, and sort of the self-deprecating understanding that it was ridiculous that there was this huge line for him. Not that he isn't, he's great, great content creator, but that like the man, the legend, Stan Lee, John Romita were just a couple tables down with lines shorter than his. It's crazy. And pointed out that I should do it. I don't know whether I would have gotten that book. And then, it was an instant treasure for me. Now, even then, to be honest, at that age, you're still immortal. There's no sense of sort of the end of things, whatever. I knew I had a treasure, but I wasn't, and comics hadn't become the sort of domestic, gross national product that it is now. And so, I loved it. It was cool. And obviously I still got Hama to sign the Sabretooth books, as I showed you. I took them home. And they went in my boxes and, was happy to have them. So then, time goes by. And I think any of us that have been collecting long enough have found sort of eras in their collecting. So there was the one I was a kid where I was sort of collecting in a haphazard way. There was my teen years where I collected a little bit more with a focus, but like not really a budget. Then I took a break, and then the early 2000s or kind of early mid 2000s was collecting again, and then sort of in recent years got back in about 2017, and that's been this sort of run. And 2017, by that time everything's very established. We're living in this age. Conventions are mass sprawling events. Autographs, signatures, photos, things like that not only cost money to get in and money to get on, but you're waiting on these long lines. I also got like an artist did a free Sabretooth sketch for me, which I was looking for. I was going to bring it anyway. And I have this sort of treasure, and it's just, yes, it's increased in value, but I mean, like, for me, it's increased in value because now as an adult, I've got an appreciation for, Stan Lee as a creative force and the influence he's had in my life. But also, like, I don't think people realize how many times Marvel tried to make this era happen. How many times? And when I say Marvel, I mean Stan Lee. I can't tell you how many times they tried to make the movie thing happen, and mostly to disastrous results. And Stan Lee always believed. He said it constantly. He always believed. He always thought it was going to work. They just hadn't gotten it right. There had been circumstances that hadn't dissuaded him, and I think hadn't broken their way. And I think that's really important. I think that it's so easy to see what doesn't work out and be like, well, we tried that and it didn't work out. Now, you can fool yourself with bad circumstances and not look objectively at mistakes you've made. But just because something doesn't work doesn't mean it's a good idea and it can't work. And, one of the most famous Stan Lee quotes, which I pass along, you've probably heard it, but it's a great one. If you have a genuinely good idea and you believe in it, don't let some idiot talk you out of it. And that's how he lived, and I'm happy he was able to see. I know that the end of his life was really complicated, but I was happy he was able to see that his vision had been realized in that way. And yeah. I know deep divers. There's complicated Stan Lee stories. There's complicated relationships with other creators. How he was treated, how Marvel treats with residuals and artists. All that true, and we can do a total other show on that. In fact, we should. But it must have been a tremendous source of pride for him to see all these characters transcend in the way that he saw. So then he dies. And, like for any of us in the community, it was a real blow. But he wasn't a young man. I mean, he lived a full life. And, I mean, I could buy a Stan Lee signature, obviously, but I'm not getting another Stan Lee signature. So to have him and Romita And I don't want to do a disservice to Romita. Romita's art is iconic, influential, defining. To have those two on that book, that's a book I'm not going to sell. That's a book. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, it's, as close to priceless as something can be. And, you know, it, it is the awareness of Hama, the push from my friend who wanted to go, the sense that before it was popular, those of us that loved it would get together and do conventions. Conventions weren't into the big business when there wasn't the unveiled movies. That Stan Lee continued to advocate for this thing he believed in. All that stuff is wrapped up in that story for me. Right? There's no like huge plot twists. But if he doesn't know, what are you doing? Go get that guy's signature. Do I miss my chance? It wasn't on my radar. It really wasn't. So maybe I missed my chance to get probably my most treasured book in my collection and the chance to share the story with you. So that more or less is the end of this portion of the story. Um, it was again, just to say, I can't explain how different the scene was in the 90s. I just can't explain it. But anyway, so I wanted to say this, and so like if you don't want to get into any, I'm not going to dive deep in this, but if you don't want to, you want to end on a happy note, you can bounce here. So this is a mental health and self harm trigger warning. If you want to bow out. So the friend of mine who recommended we go, Eric, is a really really sweet guy, and was it's we were really we were excellent friends. We couldn't be more different. First of all, he was like nobody, like I'm a lot of things. I don't think sweet is exactly how anyone's ever described me. He was a real sweet guy, really gifted athlete, just charming, kind of soft spoken guy, full of a lot of love. And you know, he battled depression for a really long time before that was really part of um our contemporary lexicon um, in a friend, in a community, in a social way. And there were a number of times, a couple of times where he had tried to kill himself, and I'd spoken with him afterwards. And like, I don't mean he downplayed it. He never downplayed it. He owned it, but it was always like, yeah, no, but I'm good now. I'm good now. I'm good now. And you know, nothing ever happened. We just grew up and drifted away. And I'm the father of twins. He ended up having triplets. Um, and many years passed, and I hadn't really spoken with him. And I saw a post on Facebook from his wife that he was missing, and my heart instantly sunk because I just knew, and and he had ended up ending his life. And this was not a this was not a guy who moped around. This wasn't a guy who like took he was he always had light. He always had love. He was always a sweet guy. It just inside, inside, he was real broken and didn't want to burden you with it. So he didn't really access it. And so, you never really knew, or at least as a young man, I didn't. And maybe had we stayed touch as an older man, I would have learned to recognize it more. And maybe had I stayed closer touch, who knows? But I could have reached out to him periodically about nothing, right? If I had checked in with him every few months, hey, remember that convention? Remember Ren and Stimpy? I still have that photo. He loved basketball. He loved basketball. Just talk basketball, whatever. If I just given a little more connection, I don't know, maybe something would be different. I'm not. We can all do that with people we've lost. I'm not saying like, oh, it's my responsibility. I don't mean that. The only reason I share that story, and I believe, May just wrapped up in that was believe National Mental Health Month. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I apologize about that. But anyway, the many crises that we're going through in this country and this world, and I think we're all really aware of it. There is a mental health crisis going on, and sometimes these things can feel overwhelming and too big to navigate. But everyone's struggling, and likely struggling in ways you don't know. And one of the things that and why this connects to the story, it isn't just that Eric was like, "Hey, let's go do this thing," and it makes me remember it. It's that it's that interest in the community, and the reason I like doing the show, and the reason I like being on um, TikTok and comic book TikTok, and the reason we want to build this Discord, and the reason I'm doing this content and bringing on different people is, um, I love the community building aspect of it, and I love the support that people can provide for each other. And this is just a shared thing that we can love and enjoy. And so I don't have any like grand proclamation other than to say, um, you know, reach out to a friend you maybe haven't talked to in a while, see how they're doing, just for no reason, talking about comics, sports, family, whatever. Just see how they're doing. Um, Sometimes some of the littlest stuff is the best stuff we can do, and um, you know, we can miss moments. I don't have any super poignant rap other than to say I'm really appreciative that Eric mentioned that convention and said we should go together. I'm really appreciative of Larry Hama. To tell you, I'm really appreciative of Stanley for creating these characters I love, and John Romita for creating these characters I love. And I am appreciative to have this platform and for you folks. And be well. See you next time.